Up in public housing projects, getting sober, returning to school at 30 to earn a degree in physics, and professional boxing. Ed Latimore teaches 4 hard lessons from the hurt business on making powerful, lasting changes in your life when you're tired of being the underdog and losing rounds to life. Welcome to the stage, Ed Latimore.
All right, before we get started, I just want to thank you guys. The state of Utah has been incredibly welcoming to me. This is my third time coming to Cedar City, and there have been so many people that I'm not going to try and thank you all. I'm just going to thank you collectively as a state and as residents of Cedar City, Utah. Okay. So for the past 18 years of my life, being involved in heavyweight boxing, fighting against some of the biggest, strongest, most aggressive members of our species, men whose sole intent is to injure and incapacitate me, I've never been afraid of getting hurt. Now, that's not to say that over the course of my career that I haven't been hurt. When I was an amateur and I was learning how to throw the jab the right way, I suffered a hyperextended elbow. I've had numerous stitches in my eyebrows from where punches busted cuts wide open, had 2 orbital fractures, one of which required surgery to repair, had a few broken ribs, you start to lose count after a while, and so many concussions that I have trouble remembering how many concussions I've had. Now, boxing is a dangerous, dangerous endeavor. When you get 2 men north of 200 pounds, that's the weight limit for heavyweight boxing, or the weight minimum for heavyweight boxing. There's no weight maximum. Throwing big punches with bad intentions and beautifully crafted technique, things can get ugly. And how ugly, you might ask? Well, boxing, despite all of these advances in medical science and rule changes for fighter safety, well, to make the fighters as safe as you can be doing something like boxing, the sport still records an average of 13 deaths per year. But I was never afraid of dying. I was never even afraid of getting hurt. That's because, unfortunately, I am very familiar with another type of way more serious violence. Growing up in the public housing projects, Northview Heights specifically, I watched a lot of people get hurt, a lot of people die. At age 3, one of my earliest memories is watching this kid that I played with get run over by a car full of gang members as they led the police on a high-speed chase through my neighborhood. At age 4, I had seen people shoot dope so often, I was so used to it that I thought it was a normal part of your childhood to have to pick through the grass before you go play in the playground so you didn't get stuck with any stray needles. My elementary school had a lot of gun violence already in the neighborhood, and we had already dealt with lockdowns whenever that gun violence from around the neighborhood got too close to the school. Now, that's the neighborhood. My home life, it wasn't much better either. The first time I had stitches, way before I'd started boxing, was from my mother's boyfriend. The second time was from my mom. She had a violent temper that came with so much physical and emotional abuse that I often had to make up stories at school to explain the bruises in my face, the swelling in my cheeks, and all that. Now, I don't tell you these stories so that you feel bad for me. I tell them to you so you can understand my background, where I've come from, what I've gone through, and how it's helped me to figure out what I believe is the single most important idea for making any change in your life. And that idea is so deceptively simple and that it seems too obvious to be true. And that idea is that nothing changes until you change what you do. Now, to demonstrate this idea to you, we got to go all the way back to this middle school. this first point for me to bring it up to you, because it's not just changing what you do. There are 4 principles that go behind that, 4 foundational ideas. And for that first foundational idea, I wanted to take you back to where I went to high school, or where I went to middle school. The middle school I went to was located in another really bad neighborhood. It was actually the feeder school for all the bad neighborhoods in my particular part of the city, on the north side of the city. Okay? And home life was terrible. School life, I had to deal with a bunch of bullies, and these guys, we call them bullies, and we get this idea of someone just, taking your lunch money. But it was a lot more than that. I had to deal with guys throwing my coat in the toilet in the middle of the winter, and that's just miserable, figuring out how to get home when it's 20 below. But the transition going home, that was where some of the worst stuff happened. That bus ride was just miserable. And on that bus ride, I never wanted to sit in the front of the bus because I had to worry about things being thrown at me. I never wanted to sit in the back of the bus because that's where all the bullies were hanging out. So I split the difference and I sat in the middle and just kept my head on a swivel. And for the most part, that worked out. One day I'm looking around and a fight is breaking out. And that's nothing normal or nothing unusual. Fights broke out all the time on the bus. But this fight turned into an all-out melee and an all-out crazy brawl. And then during that brawl where everyone is, throwing pencils at the bus driver, throwing blocks and books at kids, some guy in the back had this brilliant idea. He was going to set something on fire. He sets it on fire, and when the flame got too big, he says, okay, well, I'm not just going to throw it out the window. I'm going to open up the emergency exit in the back and throw it out that way while we're speeding down the highway on 279 North on the way home. Now, no one fell out the bus that day, but I had to do something. I figured that, if I was going to not make it to high school, it was going to be on this bus ride. So I said, let me see, what am I going to do? Let me figure out another school to go to. Now, schools were based on where you lived in the city. I couldn't move, so I decided to apply to something we have in our city called a magnet program. You find a school, it has a special offering. If you get in, you get to go. Now, my mom didn't care what school I went to, just that I went to one. So I found a school as far as possible from where I lived. As the crow flies, it's only 20 minutes, but that was an hour bus ride, and I got into that school and I went there. And in that school, I got to meet people that changed my life. They are my friends still to this day. And it's not just them being my friends that made a difference. It was the way their families embraced me, and I got to see a very different way of living. I got to see what a 2-parent household looked like. I thought that was a thing of fiction. And they treated me like I was their own. And it gave me the space to be a kid. It gave me a space to feel safe. It gave me a space to feel some love and go on and have a somewhat normal childhood. And this all started because of the first principle change that I figured out when I was 14. Control what you can. I couldn't control where I lived. I couldn't do anything about that. I couldn't do anything about my mom. I couldn't do anything about the kids around me. But I could change that school, and that was the only place where I had any energy, any agency to do something. The way I explain this principle to people, you see this little equation from physics on the bottom, work is force times distance. So no matter how much force you apply to a problem, if you don't move it, if you don't make any change, no work is done. So you lose twice when you focus on things you can't control. First, you lose when nothing happens, and then you lose second when the thing that could have happened didn't happen. For the next principle, we're going to follow me into college. The first time I tried to go to college anyhow. Because I was so unprepared because of that school I went to, the middle school I went to, when I got to high school, I had a rough time. really rough time. Such a rough time that I technically didn't graduate. They let me walk anyway, just as a show of good faith, but I didn't make it. But I played football really well, so I got to go to college. But when I got to college, I realized something. See, when I was in high school, I figured, all right, I did okay here. I struggled, but I did all right. College should be a walk in the park. It should be a walk in the park because I won't have to deal with any of this crazy stuff at home. Well, what I didn't realize is when I got to college, that back home, I had a lot of great support from those families that were around me, and now I didn't have that support at all. And I'll tell you what, I went off the rails. I got into the whole drinking scene and chasing girls, and I didn't care about going to class whatsoever. In 3 semesters, they were going to kick me out. But I beat them to it because I knew they were going to kick me out. I went to them and I said, you know what, you can't fire me. I quit, and I dropped out. And I went home, and at this point, I got this disdain for higher education, and I'm becoming a bit of a loser. I'm picking up this big drinking habit. That's the apartment I lived in. I'm 19 there. I don't know how well you can see it, but that is a mess. We got more mice as roommates than actual people. And my bed back there, it's not on any type of frame. It's just on the floor. So you can call it a bed. I mean, it's a mattress, but it is what it is. And I used to complain to everyone who would listen to me how stupid college was. And I used to say, you can go on and become successful doing anything. Meanwhile, I'm a barista at Starbucks, and I got a drinking problem. I got more in common with the homeless guys I pay to pick up booze for me than anybody who would ever actually become successful in college. Well, one of the people I happened to give this lecture to, this rant to, was my girlfriend's mother. And she happened to be a professor of biology at the University of Pittsburgh. Now, to Dr. Roberts' credit, she put up with me disrespecting her profession way longer than any rational person should have. But one day she said to me, she said, okay, let's pretend you're right and college is pointless. Why don't you tell me what you've done with your life for the past 4 years besides show up here and eat my food? And then she threw me out. Now, I went home, and I'm not going to lie, man, I sat on that mattress and cried a little bit. And I cried because she was absolutely right. I had not done anything. If I had died that day, all they'd be able to say is that he rushed the edge really well in football, and he could drink with the best of them. That's all they'd be able to say. Oh, and I also made a pretty good latte. So I said, what am I going to do? Well, I wasn't going to go back to college. I had no confidence in my academic ability whatsoever. But I had no money. I was surviving by bootlegging bus passes. This is way before you could, everything was a card. I would just take the bus pass and copy them, and that's how I got around. I thought about joining the military, but this was back in 2008. And we had just invaded Iraq, and I was like, I want to change my life, but not that much. So this was also right around when YouTube came out. One of the things I had been doing was watching all of these fights on YouTube. I don't know why I was fighting. That's what stood out to me. But I said, you know what? That's something I can do. Let's try that. So I found a boxing gym, and I joined the boxing gym. And I joined the boxing gym at 22, ancient for somebody to start this sport. But that brings me to the second principle of making change. You got to be honest with yourself. See, when you become aware of a problem, that automatically gives you the responsibility of solving said problem, or at the very least doing something to mitigate the negative effects of said problem. This is why you get people who have a lot of cognitive dissonance. They will try to not acknowledge what is actually wrong, because once you know, you're left with 2 choices. You can go, okay, I'm just going to be a piece of crap. That's how it is. A lot of people don't do that, though, or won't do that, so they just try to ignore it because of the other consequence or other outcome, which is you have to do something about it. Once Dr. Roberts made me aware of the position of my life, I had to do something about it. So I joined the boxing gym. That's one of my favorite quotes by physicist Richard Feynman. The first principle is you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. You can tell anyone anything, and it seems like they will be easier to fool. But when you talk to yourself, that's the voice you hear the most often. You repeat something long enough, you start to believe it's true, whether it is or not. But I joined this boxing gym. Now, when I joined boxing, I was terrible. I had no coordination, no footwork. I could just swing my fist really fast, and if they got to the guy's face before his got to mine, they dropped. My first 18 or so fights, I was 13-5, 13 knockouts, 5 losses, none of them by knockout. I could hit a guy as long as he was not moving, but once he moved, I was undone. I came undone. Well, somebody took notice of this after one of my worst performances, where I was fighting this kid, Fred Latham. And Fred Latham had been boxing his whole life. I was a newbie, probably had a year at this point of experience. And Fred just moved around, very relaxed, no worries about me hitting him. And I was swinging so wide that I actually scored a knockdown on myself. I swung my fist so wide that I fell over not once but twice. He beat me pretty one-handedly. After that, this guy, Chris Williams was the standout amateur in our neighborhood, or really in the city, and he decided to teach me footwork. Just this repetition just daily. Step this way, step this way, step this way, punch. And it, it seems boring, but the boring basics, that's how you master things. And I fought Fred the second time, this time with Chris Williams' education and footwork. And it was a much closer fight, way closer. I didn't knock myself down this time, so it was a big improvement over the first guy. But I still lost. I came up short. And at this point, I said, something's got to give. Something's got to change. What's going on here? I'm not getting better. I'm not ready to give up, but I'm not getting better. So I did the whole internet thing, the Google thing, and I looked around and I found a coach who I thought could make me better, the great Tom Yankeller, the Hall of Fame coach. And he just happened to live up the road. And when I say up the road, I mean 30 minutes on a highway. Here's the problem. I actually don't have a car when I first find Tom Yankeller. So I get on, I'm sure some people in here remember Craigslist. I get on Craigslist, and I find a guy selling a car for $400. And I don't know if you've ever driven a car that costs $400. But I can tell you that is all it does is drive, and it barely does that. This is not the exact car, but this is the model of the car. I couldn't find a picture of it. I must have took none because I was so embarrassed about the car. In this version, here's what this version probably has that my version did not have. Brakes, shocks, a working AC system. And when I say working, I mean like no heat or no cooling. And if you ever have to pick one to decide between whether no heat or no AC, go with no AC, because you can take your shirt off, you can roll the windows down, but when there's no heat, your stuff, if it's covered in sweat after any type of workout, it will freeze every night if you don't take it out, and that causes a whole new set of problems. And there was no horn in that car either. It just wasn't there. No idea where it went, but there wasn't a horn. But I bought that car. Now, the car wasn't the only problem. I was also the problem. For whatever reason, well, I know the exact reason, I didn't pay some tickets that I was supposed to pay. My driver's license was suspended. Not only was my driver's license suspended, but that car I just described, I don't know if the state of Utah has inspection, Pennsylvania has inspection. That car wasn't passing inspection. Because it wasn't passing inspection, I could not get insurance. So I had no insurance, no registration, no driver's license, and I had to drive on one of the more policed stretches of highway to get to Tom Yankeller's gym in this car. So I mastered looking behind me and seeing if there was any cops and 2 cars behind me and all the places you could pull off in case they did come up behind you. And I went to that gym because I believed that that would make a difference in my career. The third time I fought Fred Latham, under Tommy and Keller's tutelage, in the second round, I knocked him out. And I didn't just knock him out swinging my fist wild and hoping for luck. I set him up. I had learned how to use my feet. I had learned how to position myself. And everyone was shocked, so shocked that they put this up there. It's still there. I found this article, and I love it. It's one of my favorite moments. Not only did that victory, affirm that I was doing the right thing, that leads me to go into win the Pennsylvania State Golden Gloves, and then go on to nationals. And at nationals, the way a boxing tournament works is at least the Golden Glove tournament. Each state goes. This case, it was Indianapolis, is where the tournament was held, and they put all the names in a hat for each weight division, pick them out, pair them up. Pure luck. I got paired with California for the first round. California champ was this guy named Dominic Brazil. Dominic Brazil, before he got into boxing, he was a quarterback at Colorado and then did some NFL camps. He was a pretty good athlete, massive human too. I'm not a small man. He's 6'7". So we come out into the ring when we fight, and he raises his hands up like this to really exaggerate the height difference, and I said, what have I got myself into? But I went and I won that fight. I won it by, a score of 4-1. It's a pretty good fight. Now, I had no idea anyone was paying attention to the fight. There's so many fights going on, but Dominic's team was this group out in California. They had a bunch of money. They were preparing guys. They were trying to take Division I athletes, former Division I athletes, and turn them into Olympic-level boxers, then turn them into pro boxers. The group was really impressed, and they invited me out. Because they invited me out, that led to me winning the 2011 National Police Athletic League tournament, and that's one of the major tournaments that qualifies you for the Olympic trials. And also as a professional, because, spoiler alert, I didn't make the Olympics, but Dominic did. So my victory over Dominic aged like fine wine. And when I became a professional, that attracted the attention of Jay-Z's Rock Nation Sports. And so they signed me. All of this happened, in my opinion, this all started because it is principle. I bet on myself. When I'm driving that car up the road with no brakes, no AC, no horn, really nothing to keep me alive but the grace of God, I'm taking a bet on myself. And you have to always bet on yourself in these situations because, look, when you go to a casino or you play any game where you gamble, the house has the edge. It's not a big edge often, but it's enough to where you sit down 100 times, they should win 52, 53 times. And you can't change that edge. Well, when you bet on yourself, you're the house. You get to change the edge. Not only do you get to change the edge, you get to change the game. Now, if you want to play that game, you can also change the rules. You're in complete control. The only thing you have to do is be courageous enough to bet on yourself, to have some faith that you're going to be able to get things done. So I go out to California, and I have a pretty good time there. But all things come to an end. All good things come to an end. And when I come back to Pittsburgh, where I'm from, I'm even worse at drinking than I was before. And that's a weird way to say that. I'm worse at, or better at drinking, or worse with alcohol. But it's pretty bad. This is a Thanksgiving. I think it's a Thanksgiving. I'm not sure, but you can see how I spent it. A buddy of mine got me a job at T-Mobile because as an amateur boxer, you don't make any money. The sponsorship was paying me because it was a sponsorship, but I was back. I didn't have any money. I was still an amateur. I wasn't a pro yet. I needed something to do to feed myself. One night, a person comes in at 8:59. Anyone who's ever worked in customer service knows that if someone comes in at 9:01, even 9 o'clock, and that's closing time, you can tell them to kick rocks. Go on, get out of here. If they come in at 8:59, you got to treat them like they came in at 8 o'clock. Just got to keep going. You can't close the store. So this woman comes in. We do the whole thing. I show her all these phones she wants to look at. It takes about an hour. And then I ask, hey, do you want to buy a phone? What phone would you like? I showed her everything in the store. She says, you know, this has been really helpful. I'm going to come in tomorrow and get this phone. And I said, thank you. But inside, I was yelling all types of expletives because somebody else was going to get my commission from the hard-earned work. But at that point, I was really fed up. I was fed up for two reasons. One, I was supposed to go to a party and drink some more. That's what my priorities were. But two, I didn't see any future for myself here. If boxing was taken away from me, was this my life? Was this what I was going to do? Sell phones for $9.28 an hour plus commission and deal with people who wanted to mosey in 1 minute to closing time and not make a decision? So I sat in the parking lot, and this is from, I learned this when I was coaching a kid who was 14. I learned that The Matrix is a movie that came out in the late 1900s, and that's one way to say it. So anybody who was not alive in the late 1900s won't recognize this, but in in The Matrix, there's this great scene where where Neo is about to go meet Morpheus, and he's about to jump out the car and leave because he don't want to do it that way. But Trinity stops him. And she's like, you don't want to go down that road, Neo. And he says, why? And she goes, because you've been down that road and you know exactly where it ends. And that's not where you want to be. I could see that if I kept going down this road, I'd end up in a place where I didn't want to be. The fighter's graveyard, I call it all kinds of things. It could have been prison, could have been a lot of health problems, who knows. But I had to make a change. And so I did make a change. This time, the military didn't look so bad. So I enlisted in the military, and I enlisted in the military because my thought here is I need to just go back to school and better myself. But the problem is I don't have any confidence in my education whatsoever. I don't have any confidence in my ability to learn. I pulled up this transcript from high school. This was originally for an article I wrote, and I wanted to make a point to the people. The article was about how to get better at math. I wanted to make a point that I was not some math savant who happened to just be writing stuff to cheer people up. Like, no, I was really bad, and I pulled it up. While looking, and you can see the highlighted points, those are on my math grades. You can see they're terrible. You can see the grades get progressively worse because that was like my first stop when I put up my transcript. I was like, I know I was a bad student, but how bad was it? I was like, wow, I see why they didn't let me graduate. That's terrible. So I had to go back and start relearning everything from scratch when I decided I wanted to go back to college at that point when I was 28. And so not only did I go online and do every math problem, when I was at AIT in the Army, I ordered these books. And there really are 3,000 problems in each one. And if you do every single problem, you will absolutely know calculus and physics. You'll know it so well that you'll do better than other physics students who are like actually smart and actually gifted. Actually, did not graduate or did graduate from high school. We have to take this exam in college in our final year called the major fields. They want to see, did you actually learn anything? Is this program good? And so I took that program, and as you get that test, and when I took that test, you can see I did pretty well. I did better than actually most people in the school ever do, and better than like 60% of the nation. And this is from a guy who did not graduate high school, largely because he's bad at math. And anyone who doesn't know, you need a lot of math to do physics. So I'm still fighting at this point. I'm a professional. Things are going well. Rock Nation is moving me along, and they are promoting my career greatly. And they get me on TV. Anyone who knows boxing, forgive me for speaking to the casuals for a moment. That's what we call people who don't know boxing, the casuals, right? I fought Trey Lippe Morrison on Showtime. Trey Lippe Morrison is the son of Tommy Morrison, who was the WBA champ, heavyweight champ when he was alive. His life ended early due to some tragic complications due to his lifestyles. So everyone's analyzing the fight. We're both undefeated. It's like a 50-50 fight, as they say. No one can decide who's going to win this fight. I thought I had a pretty good chance. I've been fighting longer. I had more experience. It was all good. That's how it started. I'm standing up there doing the whole posing thing in front of everybody, sending these pictures to everyone, being obnoxious, and you got to watch this fight. And that's how it ended. And he hit me so hard that I thought I slipped. And then I stood up and I was like, why are you counting, man? I just slipped. And I looked at the video a few months later and I was like, wow, no, he messed me up pretty good. It was at this point I learned something really valuable and really positive and really constructive for the rest of my life. The next day, you know, the hotel doesn't care that you're feeling all bad for yourself. I'm laying there feeling really bad for myself, but they're like, you got to get up and you got to get out. So I go down to breakfast, and while I'm having breakfast, I don't want to check my phone because the internet is fast. And I'm probably a bunch of memes right now. Really don't go watch this fight, but if you do, I don't feel bad. So instead of checking my phone, I look at the news, and I'm watching the news on TV. And I never watch the news because it's full of negativity and it really affects your mom. But I watch the news that day because I don't want to scroll on my phone. First story I see is about bombings in Aleppo, Syria. I had no idea what was going on over there, but Aleppo, Syria looked like something from Fallout. It was awful. The next story I saw on the news that morning was about a police shooting in North Carolina. And they were showing a police shooting that had happened in Tulsa, because the fight took place in Oklahoma, to just show, you know, to make a point about police violence and how that's going on. And then the last story that showed up, that it happened the night of the fight, some guy walked into a mall in Washington and shot 6 people, one of which was a cancer survivor. And I thought about this and I said, wow, I just had a really bad night and I feel really bad about it, but I get to go home and do something else with my life. These people, just because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time, they don't get to do that. And so I went on and went to do something else. Because when you lose a fight that badly, your promoter is like, we want nothing to do with you. You brought shame on our name. Goodbye. The fight was in Oklahoma. It took about a day to get home. By the time I got home, they had already sent me my severance letter saying goodbye. They overnighted it. That's how badly they wanted to get rid of me. So I started tutoring. Math and physics to high schoolers because I needed money. And I needed money in a way that would allow me to finish my degree. And so I started tutoring. And turns out I absolutely love teaching, way more than I like boxing. It's a lot more gentle on the brain cells as well. And I kept these because these are just messages from students, from helping them with calculus and physics and all. Just a funny story about the one on the left. When I started working with her the first day, we're working on some problem, and I said to her, I said, hey, don't worry. I failed this class 3 times before I figured it out. And she looked at me like, what? Like, did my parents make a mistake? I'm like, no, it's all good. Here's how we solve it. But I was telling her that just so she understood that, I had made all these mistakes already. I can help you not make them. And I know every way you're going to make the mistake, like every way. finally, I earned my degree in physics. I wish that Duquesne University, where I got my degree, put your major on the degree, but they give out these little generic things. So to prove to people, because they're like, oh, you're a boxer, there's no way you got a physics degree. That must be, as the kids say, cap. So instead I saved this when they sent out the announcement to show right at the bottom, there I am, BA Physics. So there's the fourth principle. To change what you do, you got to change who you are, because your identity matters way more than motivation, and is more sustainable than discipline. If you change how you think and how you see yourself, which is what I did through this whole journey, you can become pretty much anything you want to be. You can change your life in any way you want to change it. So there are all the lives of me, and in particular, that last photo, because I took some time off after I fought. That was me just in July I fought. July 40, no less. I just like to throw that out there. But yeah, so thank you, and I hope you guys got something out of this, and I hope you guys understand that you can change your life in any way you want at any time.
One Utah Summit Leadership Day reserves time.